because we admired their efforts in trying to keep the military-industrial complex out of southeastern Colorado. So today they will be giving a presentation on this, and we have Steve Wooten, Grady Grissom, Rebecca Goodwin, and Doug Holdread.
This is the map that started the firestorm in late 2005, early 2006. But before we talk about that, I want to give a little bit of the history of the Pinon Canyon Maneuver Site and the Coalition. And the Pinon Canyon Maneuver Site originated in the 80s, but before that, in the late 70s, they tried to expand Fort Carson proper into southern El Paso County and northern Pueblo County around Pueblo Reservoir. And the residents of El Paso County and Pueblo County were able to stop that expansion of Fort Carson. So the DOD looked at two alternative sites. One was in Huerfano County, which is near Walsenburg, which is on down I-25 from Pueblo, and the other was further south near Trinidad, and that second site is the one that they eventually settled on. And in the early 1980s, the best way to describe the creation of the Pinon Canyon Maneuver Site was that the communities of southeast Colorado were essentially bulldozed by the Department of Defense and the Army Corps of Engineers. And the way that process happened, there were a lot of very ugly scenarios involved. The ranchers in the area, in the creation of the Pinon Canyon Maneuver Site in the 80s, the ranchers were kind of on an island. The Army talked to the municipalities and the counties and the business community and convinced them that Pinon Canyon Maneuver Site would bring economic development. And to some extent, the municipalities and the counties bought into that, and so in that situation, the ranchers were on their own, and they got overrun. And before it was done, it started with one willing seller, and before it was done, it was the largest condemnation action in U.S. history. 250,000 acres in the central part of Las Animas County became the Pinon Canyon Maneuver Site. And this map then was leaked to the press in late 2005, and this is the map that began the controversy about expanding the Pinon Canyon Maneuver Site. The reporter who leaked this map was early in the coalition. He was a board member of the coalition, and he told me after a meeting one night that he would go to his grave with the identity of the person that gave him this map. That it's inferred that was a Fort Carson employee, but nobody knows for sure where it came from. And to give you a concept of scale, from Pueblo to the New Mexico line is 125 miles, something like that. And from Pueblo, or from I-25 here to the Kansas line is about 225 miles. So this map was 5.3 million acres, I think, but it's essentially a block of southeast Colorado that runs from the mountains to the Kansas line and from the Arkansas River to the New Mexico line. And that initially the Army denied that this was their map, and they also, then they finally did admit it was their map. They said, well, yeah, we want to expand, but we're not going to condemn. And then they said, well, maybe we will condemn. And then they said, no, we won't condemn. Is everybody familiar with, eminent domain? It's a process by which the federal government can force someone to sell their land. So essentially, and in the 80s, when Pinon Canyon Maneuver Site was created, most of the landowners, the ranchers in that area, got a notice that said you will vacate your property in 90 days and here's what you will be paid for it. And before it was done, some of those families were escorted off their land by federal marshals. There was a clipping from the 80s with a quote from an elderly lady that she was unable to find somewhere to live in that 90 days, and so she stayed in her house, and before it was done, she was charged rent by the United States Army for the couple months that she lived in her house before she could find somewhere to go. So condemnation is the process by which the federal government forces someone to sell their land. And so when I said the creation of the Piñon Canyon Maneuver Site, when I said it started with a willing seller, there was a speculator that came into the area and knew ahead of time that the Army wanted to buy this land. So that speculator bought land or wrote contracts with landowners so that if that land got sold to the federal government, he would get a cut of it. And that was the domino that started the process. Then the landowners are scared. All of a sudden, I'm going to have military training next door. And it was, in fact, a domino process that involved willing condemnation, they say 25%, but the majority of it, over 50% of it, was unwilling condemnation. And so what the people of Southeast Colorado, when this map was published, the mission in front of us was to stop the Army from doing what they did in the 80s, and that is forcing people to sell their land. The strategy from the start was to make the case that the expansion of Piñon Canyon was unnecessary, not that it should go somewhere else. And Doug Holdread, who kind of organized this forum this evening and organized the art trailer and all that, this guy is a walking idea. But he is also very adept at researching archives, government archives, and a lot of the information that the coalition put together that made the case that this was absolutely unnecessary came from Doug Holdread's research work. And if anybody's interested in what that case is, we'd be happy, any of the four of us would be happy to go into the finer points. But the key point is that the coalition didn't try to push this somewhere else. They realized it was unnecessary.
Well, I'm Doug Holdread. I'm an artist and an educator. And 5 years ago, well, over 5 years ago now, when the Army's map surfaced showing their big plans to expand the Piñon Canyon Maneuver Site to 6.9 million acres, I felt like, okay, this is right here. This is right on my doorstep. I need to do something about it. So I started to contact artists that I knew and artists that those artists knew, and before too long we had about 70 artists from all over Colorado who were interested in supporting the opposition to the expansion of the Piñon Canyon Maneuver Site. And the way we've done that is, first of all, just by getting some artists together and doing artwork in the canyons. So we went down at the invitation of the Piñon Canyon Expansion Opposition Coalition and had some painting outings where artists photographed and painted on location. And that was followed by an exhibition in Denver where we sold, I think, something like 40 pieces of work, and all the proceeds from those paintings went to support the cause. Now what we're doing is taking this trailer, this traveling art gallery, around to different locations in the state and using it kind of as a combination fundraising effort as well as just a public awareness tool to maintain the profile of the issue. And it's been fun. We haven't really sold a lot of artwork out of the trailer, but I think it's been a neat way to make people aware that Piñon Canyon and that part of the state isn't just flat, barren, desert prairie. There's just some beautiful canyon country and probably more importantly, a really unique traditional culture among the ranching families that have been there since the 1800s and that are trying to hang on to that way of life.